Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett, and I'm glad to be joined today by Heartbeat International's Vice President of Ministry Services, Tracie Shellhouse, and our special guest from Lifeline Children's Services, Christie Mac Segars. And today we're talking about adoption, especially as we celebrate November as National Adoption Awareness Month. And I'll be posting adoption resources in the show notes as well from Heartbeat Academy so that you can keep your pregnancy help organization updated on the latest on the topic of adoption. Heartbeat Academy continues to bring you training materials for your pregnancy center staff and volunteers through in-person, in-print, and online formats. Visit heartbeatservices.org for more. Well, Tracie and Christie Mac, it's great to have you here. I'll turn things over to you as we talk about adoption.
All right. Thank you so much, Christine. And Christie Mac, thank you for being with us. Adoption is something that is a huge part of pregnancy help, and yet often isn't focused on as much as we would like to see, and often sometimes not chosen as many times as we believe could be really beneficial. And one of the great resources that I've had throughout my service in pregnancy help and being blessed to start in the Birmingham, Alabama area is I was very near Lifeline Children's Services and had the opportunity to get to know you all right off the bat, even as a volunteer. But throughout the years, Lifeline Children's Services has proven to be just a forerunner and a leader in the adoption realm, and then also there's been a lot of expansion over the years too. Y'all stepped into some new arenas. But Christie, I would love to hear a little bit about your background. And you've been with Lifeline for a long time, and why you've chosen to invest this time of your life professionally at Lifeline Children's Services.
Yeah, thank you, Tracie and Christine. I'm glad to be here. I would say, my background just from an education standpoint is I got my master's of social work, and really kind of through that always had a heart for the vulnerable, a heart for vulnerable children, vulnerable families, and really did not really become a believer until a little later in my career, or once I had kind of started my career, like late 20s, early 30s. And it was just neat to see how the Lord took my passions for the vulnerable, but helped me see that while I was doing some good work and helping those, I was often pointing people to themselves and not to Christ. And so was able and just really privileged to find a place that I could marry my passions of serving the vulnerable as well as really wanting people to know Jesus, and knowing that he ultimately is the Savior and the where people can be redeemed. And so that's how I ended up at Lifeline. And I've been with Lifeline over 11 years. And I currently serve as Vice President of Domestic Services, and just truly have this passion specifically for vulnerable women within vulnerable children and families. Part of my own testimony, I really could have been a woman in an unexpected pregnancy. My decisions easily could have led me there. God's grace and sovereignty, for whatever reason, did not put me in that situation, but the decisions I was making and the way that I thought and those things definitely had me as a vulnerable woman. And so just have a passion for women to know Jesus, to know that many of the things that I was chasing after will never satisfy, and wanting women to be empowered and through that, and to have choices and to be able to live life abundantly, and for their children to live life abundantly. So
that is awesome. I love how the Lord has led you on a path, and we know that he doesn't waste anything, and that he works everything together for the good. And that's even our history where we've been, because often it informs where we are and where he's taking us. But one of the things I love hearing in that is it sounds like because of your past experience and who you once were, because we know that that's not who you are now, that probably gives you even a greater sense of understanding for those that are vulnerable and those that find themselves in situations that were not expected. And I think a lot of times, empathy is huge, and that's very important. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Within the pregnancy center, when we are educating on options coaching or options counseling, talking with them about abortion, the education perspective there, talking with them about the option to carry, there's still options. It's not just carry and parent. There can be the loving choice of caring and placing. And so within the centers, how often are we seeing women choose adoption? Those that are experiencing unexpected and unplanned pregnancies, what percentage are choosing the option to place?
Yeah. Honestly, we're seeing probably less than 2% of women choose adoption. Some places will even say it's less than 1% of those that are actually ending up choosing. Now, more do consider, but that's who ends up choosing that option.
Why do you think that is? Why do more women not consider adoption?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things. And I think focusing in, I love the question of why do more women not consider it? Because we know parenting, that's what we desire, right? Like that is, if a woman can parent and that's the life decision that she can do, we celebrate that and want to support that. But we also believe that in order to make a good choice and to know if that choice is best for you and your baby, you got to know what the choices are. Right. And if you think there's only one choice and you don't weigh the pros and cons of all the choices, then it's harder to make a good decision. And so I like thinking about it from a place of not why do more women not choose it, but why do more women not consider it? And when we're thinking about pregnancy health organizations, like I think that we got to trust in that sovereignty of God as our responsibility is to educate and empower. But our responsibility is not on the actual decision. And so I think even looking at some of the research that's recently come out from both National Council for Adoption as well as Opt Institute, there's kind of three main reasons why women don't consider adoption. And what is interesting about all three of these is they're typically based on myths and misinformation about adoption. And so that can be fixed by education and by presenting the options and doing that and helping her understand that. So those three are because she feels that the experience for her or for the child will be like the foster care system. Many women have experienced in vulnerable situations have experienced the foster care system, know how children come in and out, how the birth mother and the birth family really don't have a lot of say and control. But voluntary infant adoption that we're talking about is not the foster care system. And so we want to be able to educate her and help her understand how it's not the foster care system. It's actually very different, that she has control. She gets to choose the family. The child doesn't bounce from home to home to home. The child goes from the hospital to their permanent home in most situations. So just lots of things that are very different. Number two, is she's concerned about the welfare of the child. What I love about this is when we think about women who are in unexpected pregnancies, especially those that are choosing abortion, we often are really wanting her to think about the child, right? Like that there is a life in your womb. Be concerned about both your life and the life of the child. And this shows us that she is like when she's not considering adoption, or even sometimes, which it's hard for us to understand when she's choosing abortion, while it doesn't make rational sense, some of the things that she's concerned about the welfare of the child. If she's choosing abortion, maybe she doesn't want to bring the child into a domestic violence situation. She doesn't want to bring the child into a situation that she has. And so again, education for her on resources and things that can help with that. In the same way, if she doesn't want to choose adoption because she's concerned about the welfare of the child, it's again education and empowerment that often that is still based on her idea of the foster care system, right? And that child bounces from home to home, that you don't really know what's going on. So helping educate on how there's in voluntary adoption, there's actually waiting families, not waiting children. In foster care, there's waiting children, and so you're in overcrowded foster homes, that kind of thing. In voluntary adoption, there's waiting families, families that deeply desire to care for a child, who have been vetted and trained and equipped and all of these different things. And if she wants open adoption, she gets to see how the child is doing and see that she made a good choice. And then the third one is really the influence of others. That's the third reason why women don't consider it. Maybe that's the father of the child, maybe it's a mom or a grandma or somebody like that that's really speaking to her about other options, particularly influencing her towards abortion, or maybe pushing towards parenting when she doesn't feel equipped at all to parent. So.
It's interesting. Something that I've noticed over the years in sharing the option of adoption was also a fear of I'm going to be judged, that
Yes.
people are going to think I just gave up my child.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the pregnancy help centers, we have the opportunity to help her see that. First thing, I don't like the language of giving up. I think that is the last thing you're doing. You're not giving up, you're giving life. But for her to be able to see that, for the woman in that position, that you're not giving up, you're actually being empowered.
That's right.
And you're being empowered with choices and options. And, but that being said, how do we best empower her? I mean, what's the timeline? When does she need to hear about it? And what methods, what are the best ways for us to present it to her so that she can understand truly what her options are and have the opportunity to consider adoption?
Yeah, great question. And a simple answer is, how do we empower? Is we make sure she knows it's an option. Like,
yes.
I know that sounds so simple. But I think so often we try to pick and choose who we present the option to. And I think being able to present the option to all women who are in an unexpected pregnancy, simply so she can make a good choice. I think sometimes we're scared to present adoption because we don't want to seem like we're suggesting it, that would be the best option for her, or that maybe she couldn't be a good parent. So we're scared to present it because we don't want it to feel like a suggestion that we're telling her she couldn't be a good mom or those kinds of things. Well, if we're presenting it in a more proactive and a less reactive way, then it's that we're not suggesting it, we're educating and we're empowering. For example, simply saying something like, okay, now that you've seen the ultrasound, now that we have a pregnancy test, whatever your process may be in your center, you have 3 options: abortion, parenting, or choosing parents. Or you could say abortion, parenting, or adoption. And then saying, which one do you want to talk about first? Just something real simple like that, because then you're just presenting all 3. You're going to educate on all 3. You're not suggesting a certain one, but you're actually giving her the control back in the conversation, which helps her feel empowered because she's getting to choose, which one do I talk about first? But it's not a suggestion of, we're only going to talk about this one because that's what I think you need to hear about, kind of thing. In fact, National Council for Adoption recently did a study on women who did make an adoption plan, those who've made it 30, 40 years ago, as well as much more recently. And they were particularly looking at satisfaction. Are they satisfied with their decision? And the majority of women were satisfied, and those that have made the choice more recently, since we've had modern open adoption, we're even more satisfied, which just says we're getting better.
Mm-hmm.
We're learning how to do this better, right? But the number one factor that led to their satisfaction was that they received non-coercive options counseling. Well, to me, to do non-coercive options counseling means we have to talk about all the options, right? And not suggest certain things, but to educate and empower on all those things.
Yeah.
And that way, when she makes a decision, she's going to be satisfied in that.
Absolutely. I think about Hosea 4:6 that says that people perish for a lack of knowledge.
Yes.
And I think that that's very applicable to options counseling, because if we do not present all the options, and the only options that are presented is here's education on abortion, and you can parent for the woman that sees herself in a situation that's an impossible situation, and she goes, I absolutely can't parent. The only other option that has been that she's been educated on is abortion.
Right.
And to leave out the option of adoption and what that can look like, and cast a vision for that and show her the value of it and the value of herself.
That's right.
Really can lead to a position where the unborn perish.
That's right.
Because she doesn't recognize that she has another venue other than what she feels is an impossible one. And also, it's not just the unborn.
That's right.
We know that abortion hurts the heart of the mother, and we know that it increases. There are so many, I would almost say comorbidities, but there are so many things as far as mental health issues and suicide rates and so forth that come along. So also looking at just the longevity of her life and her having the opportunity to choose abundant life for herself down the road can be very much affected by that. And, and the thing is I love that you said just mentioning it. Like one of the first things is just go, and especially the way because you're empowering her to say, so the options are parent, adoption, abortion. What would you like to talk about first?
Yeah.
That is so powerful. And I also think it can be very telling. That open-ended question where you're putting her in the seat, that really tells you where her thoughts are. And I think as the client advocate or the coach in the room, that can really be empowering to help you discern what direction that you need to go in. That is absolutely amazing. So years ago, many, many years ago, more than 2 decades ago, and you may remember this initiative, but there was the Infant Adoption Awareness Initiative, and I had the honor to be in the pilot program when it was first taught. And at the time, I was a volunteer in my local pregnancy center in the Birmingham area. But one of the things that stood out to me was a statistic that I believe is what really solidified to me that adoption is an option that we must be intentional about presenting. And it was that, and you mentioned this, some women consider adoption, but they don't choose it. But in that education, statistics at that time indicated that women experiencing unexpected pregnancy that took the time to truly consider their options and the option of adoption, those that chose life reported, and not only chose life, but chose to parent, reported a greater satisfaction in parenting, and they felt more equipped to parent. Is that still a good statistic? Is that still, is there a good indication that impacts those that parent?
100%, yes. And I think that's what I mean when I'm saying, like, you can't make a good choice without knowing your choices, right? Like if we think about any choice we've made in life, if we, like, I can think about things where I'm like, I made a decision and then I find out later that there was another choice that I didn't know about, then I'm like, oh man, well, if I'd known that, then I might have made a different decision, right? Or if then I can also think about things where I'm like, okay, I know I looked at the pros and the cons of everything. And while every decision was a tough decision, because that's what we're experiencing in unexpected pregnancy, every single choice is going to have loss and grief and challenges, right? We've got to be real about that. But if I consider all of them, really pray through, weigh the pros and cons, then when I make a decision, I'm way more confident in that decision. Way
Absolutely.
more confident. And that's where it's like the goal's not to get more women to choose adoption. The goal is to get more women to be confident in the life decision that they do. Because if they parent, we want that to be an abundant life. We want them to parent successfully. We want them to have all of those things. And if it's adoption, we want them to be confident in that as well.
So I know one of the things that can be intimidating, and you mentioned this, is the fear of, if I mention it, is she going to think I'm judging her? Is she going to think that I don't think she can parent or she shouldn't? And so a lot of times we allow, our insecurities to prevent us sometimes from presenting things that are great options. But in that place of insecurity, I think there's also sometimes we feel like we have to be experts on everything. In order to talk about something, we have to be an expert.
Yes.
And so those that are the client advocates that are doing the options coaching, that sometimes you've got 20 minutes to do, and
Right.
you can't unpack all three options in their entirety. Do the client advocates and those serving the woman in the pregnancy center, do they have to be adoption experts?
No, no. This, I absolutely love the picture in First Corinthians of the body of Christ. Some of us are arms, some of us are legs, some of us are toes, right? Like we're all something. But we need each other. And the legs shouldn't be saying, oh, I wish I could be an arm. And the arm shouldn't be saying, oh, I wish I could be a leg, right? Like we need each other. And I think this is the beauty of the pregnancy help organizations and just how we all have different giftings and things. The pregnancy centers are gifted at getting a life decision, right? Like really pouring into that woman. They also have a lot of giftings if she does choose parenting, and some resources and helping with that. Christian life-affirming adoption agencies are gifted in the adoption piece. And so client advocates, volunteers at pregnancy centers do not have to be the expert on adoption. This is where it's so important to simply be educated, know enough, right, to present the option. But if she wants more information about adoption, refer. Refer
Yes.
to a trusted, vetted partner that you know is not going to have a goal of adoption, but is going to have that goal of empowerment. That's going to have that goal of kind of continuing that conversation you started. Um, and 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 by refer, I do not mean hand her a list of places that she has to walk out the door and call. By refer, I mean making a relational connection to somebody, either picking up the phone and calling them right then and there. We actually have several like release forms and templates that we can provide if anybody needs those, of how you can get her to say, yes, I'd love for an adoption agency to reach out to me. And these forms, make sure you're protecting confidentiality, that you're minimizing risk, all those things that you need to do from a liability standpoint. And so that you as a pregnancy help organization can send that to the adoption agency, and then they can make that reach out, instead of putting it on her to do that.
I love that because, and I know not every center has Lifeline Children's Services has a rep right there nearby, or a representative from another Christian pro-life agency that has the same moorings.
Yeah.
But I've always been very blessed to have connections nearby. And one of the things I loved is that we had the referral list, and we were able to say, these organizations can help you. They can talk with you. They can tell you about the resources that they have. Are you interested in talking with one? Yeah. And sometimes I had the opportunity to say, this agency right here actually has a representative in town, and they might be able to come in today and speak with you in the office. But if not, we are happy to make a connection for you. And you can meet with them at another time, someplace else. Or if you would like, we can make a space here in one of our client advocate rooms for you to meet with. And I would often find that women, because by then we had built a rapport in the pregnancy center and they felt safe.
That's right.
That to say, hey, we'll get on the phone. We'll see if they can come now. If not, we'll set an appointment, and you're going to be back at this safe place. And it's a beautiful picture for a continuum of care that the client feels very protected and empowered in. But I also love that there's still the handoff.
That's right.
And but I would ask, do you want to, would you like to call and let's see if we can connect now? Do you want to talk with someone in person? And it's really great if you do have someone nearby or someone that can get on the phone quickly.
That's right.
I do think that there should be a sense of urgency if she's interested. We don't want to go, well, here's the list, and her take it, and maybe she keeps thinking, I'm going to make that call. I'm going to make that call. And then they never do. Something that you mentioned before too, that I think is important, is that you're not focusing on getting them to choose adoption. Your focus is to be able to empower them to make life-affirming decisions, the same that pregnancy centers are. And you come alongside and providing your expertise and resources. But something that you mentioned is that you celebrate and support parenting choices. And so sometimes I know that women, maybe in the beginning of their pregnancy or throughout a portion of it, they don't have support from their family. Things are difficult, but then sometimes they realize, I really do believe I can parent. I've weighed the options, or I have more resources or help from friends and family than I realized before. And even though they've headed down the path of placement, maybe later in the pregnancy, they then come back and go, no, I'm not going to place. I'm going to choose to parent. So what does that look like as you come alongside those mothers that further down the road choose to parent? How do you help celebrate their parenting choice?
Yes. I love this question. And for me, this goes back to, again, the beauty of the body of Christ, and why we want to do those relational referrals and connections instead of just kind of handing lists, because that is the reality. In fact, I don't know what other agencies' statistics are, but only 10% of our referrals actually end up placing. And so that means that there's another 90% that we talk with. We give more information about adoption. Some we might walk all the way up to choosing a family and doing all that. Some decide to parent before then. Some decide to parent, after a match, those kinds of things. Well, we want to be able to equip her to parent well. So many times we are connecting her back to the pregnancy center for the services and those things that they have, or other community resources that are around to support her well. Also, we as an agency have several family preservation services as well that we do that are really kind of church run. And so if we have something like that in the community, we're going to connect her. But I think what's so important about this is, and even when we're doing options counseling, both from the very beginning to the end, is that we should continue options counseling. Helping her understand the world and the abortion world is telling her she needs to make a decision quickly. We can tell her, hey, you can slow down. You can slow down. You've got a long time to make a decision. And helping her do that. And so that's why we continue the options conversation once a woman is referred to us, because her situations can change. In fact, one of the things we're really seeing, and this comes from some research too, is most of the women that are actually choosing adoption are making that decision later in pregnancy, like towards the end of second trimester, beginning of third trimester. So one of the things that I would love to see, and we're really trying to think through this a little bit more, is how even do pregnancy help organizations continue that options conversation after a life decision is made, right? Get that life decision, but let's continue that options conversation as you're doing parenting classes, as you're doing different services, because in the same way that she may think she's going to do adoption, but then actually, hey, father is going to do some support, grandmother's going to do some support. My situation has changed a little bit. It can change the other way also. She may think I have this support and this and these things going on, but that may really change, and adoption may be something that she really wants to consider much later on. Which I think is so, just goes back to why we have to present all the options in the very beginning, but then
Yes.
continue, and so that she has the education, but it doesn't have to be, she has to make a decision right then and there about adoption, right? But
Yes.
she's at least educated, and then we can kind of continue that conversation later on. So
Yeah. So for pregnancy help organizations, it's not like they're doing this blindly. There is actually a resource that LAPCO, the Leadership Alliance of Pregnancy Care Organizations, has recently, I believe, updated, if I'm not mistaken, that sort of give guidelines for in pregnancy help organizations, nonprofits. How should we go about making referrals, and what does that look like? And I was just curious if you could unpack that just a little bit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. And I hope that this can be linked in the notes for everybody to have. But there are some kind of guidelines that that these organizations have kind of put together of how do you do adoption well. And it talks a lot about being educated, making sure that your team is trained, about not acting as kind of an adoption broker yourself, but really connecting with those vetted adoption agencies. But it also really goes into making those referrals, and to making sure that the referral is permission based and that it's a relational connection. And then we also have kind of three guidelines or three kind of components of what does that look like, and we can provide notes for that too, of what does that mean to make a permission-based and relational connection. And it provides some of these forms that I was talking about, of how to be relational, how to minimize the risk, how to be permission-based, so that you're not just handing those lists and expecting her to walk out the door and do that. Because what we know is women who are walking through these doors, they're in crisis. They've experienced trauma of some kind, and it took a lot for them to even walk through that door. So to ask them to then do that and then make another phone call or another reach out, that's just not going to happen. And so how do we help connect them better that way? And so we have several resources that we'd love to make available just to help you do that better. So.
Okay, awesome. And yes, we can definitely link them and make those resources available. So thank you. Well, something that I would love to sort of discuss as we're wrapping up is adoption is a life decision, and it's also a lifetime decision, just as parenting is.
Right.
And there are women who are considering when they come to the pregnancy center or come to Lifeline, they are talking with the adoption agency. They are also considering terminating. And part of it is they're just looking at, I just can't imagine what life is going to look like going forward. And adoption is a very loving option, but I do know I've spoken with clients that said, oh, I could never do that.
Right.
But a big part of the reason women choose to terminate, why women feel so desperate in an unexpected pregnancy, is because they feel alone.
Yes.
They feel that they don't have the support and the resources that they need. And in placing, there's also sometimes people will go, but I'm going to be alone again. I'm going to place and then I'm going to be by myself.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important that we're aware that even in the midst of her decision and her decision to place, she's
Mhm.
still not alone. There is
That's right.
still an opportunity for continuum of care. And I think sometimes people are unaware, because I've actually had people say, well, okay, but once they place, then what? And I'm like, so who are you referring to? Because
Right.
I know the people that I've referred to, there is a then what. So
Uh-huh.
for the woman that makes that decision, and she places, it is a loving decision, but there is an element for many that is a grieving, even though they're celebrating the life of their child. Could you
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about what the after placement
Yes.
care and the continuum of care for that, the parents, the mother, the father that choose placement? What can that look like, and what does it look like at Lifeline?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And this is so important. And I think when you're thinking about who is on your referral list, this is something that you really need to dig into. And we have questions you can ask if you want to like vet different referral sources and those kinds of things that we're happy to provide as well. But yes, I mean, that it's so key because it's not just a one-time thing. This is not a transaction. And there are adoption professionals that operate as if it's a transaction, and it breaks my heart. And we've got to remember that she is made in the image of God in the same way that that child is made in the image of God. And so we want to continue to pour into her and continue to support her, depending on it, any decision that she makes. And so at Lifeline, we have kind of some intentional times, like we have certain times that we're going to intentionally follow up with her, to reach out, to check in on her, where we're the one making that reach out. And then we also have several things to where she can be the one kind of initiating it, because every mom's a little different, honestly. Like sometimes they want us to initiate it, sometimes they want to kind of wait a little bit and then they initiate it. And so we do a little bit of both and provide a little bit of both options. And so we have an online birth mother support group, where we moms just get to interact with each other. We'll often lead discussions in those things. We have birth mother retreats that we do, where we'll go for a weekend with many moms and just remind them of truths in scripture, but also just reminding them of who they are. We have counselors who can provide true counseling. We have some here on staff, but we also have a fund that we're able, that if she needs something more than what we can provide on staff, that we can help provide that for her. And then several other things as well, but those are kind of the big things. So
Awesome. Thank you. So, is there any question that I haven't asked that I should have, or any parting thought that you would like to leave the audience with?
goodness, that's I could go all day. But no, I mean, I think just make sure that you're educated, and we would love to provide that education. Make sure that you're vetting those referral sources, and you like, and that you're not feeling like you have to be the expert, that you are referring and that you're referring relationally. And again, we've got some templates and forms and things to help you do that. And just be confident. Like let's give her choices, life choices, so she can make a good choice.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being with us, Christie Mac.
Absolutely.
I think this has been a great podcast.
Well, thank you.
And I think it's got great information. And so thank you for your time. Thank you for what Lifeline Children's Services does for the pregnancy help movement. and all those you serve. And I just pray that the Lord continues to bless you as you continue to expand your territory and you serve in more and more places and provide new services. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Christine. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracie. Thanks, Christie Mac. Can you give us a website or some contact info if anyone would like to get in touch with you about anything that was brought up today?
Yes, absolutely. Contact information, a good email address is domesticadoption@lifelinechild.org. Or if it's easier, pregnant@lifelinechild.org. We can do either one of those. Our website for women that really talks a lot about adoption is planmyadoption.org. And so that's a great place to go as well. And so we would love to connect and provide training and consultation and all of those things.
Awesome. Thank you. I love how you talk about the relationship between the adoption agency and the pregnancy help organization, and how when that's strong, it's really easy to connect the client to both of you, and it's not bouncing back and forth. It's go here for your adoption questions, and then we have the parenting classes at the center. And so just a really strong connection there. And so it sounds like you guys have some really great resources to assist with that. So again, training is really important. So sharing this podcast is a great way to train your staff in an easy to digest format where they can just listen in and gather some ideas. So feel free to share this with others in your organization who are counseling those clients. And subscribe to the Pregnancy Help podcast for information on all other topics related to pregnancy help. So with that, I wish all of our listeners a very blessed rest of your day, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.